Let me start, before I do my talk, let me start with a personal story. The year is 1978. The setting is Soviet Union, former Soviet Union. I'm 18-year-old youth, full of energy, intellectual vitality, and I am ready to take my entrance exams in St. Petersburg University. Since my sixth grade, I was dreaming about becoming a historian, and I did become a historian. I teach history these days. But that year, I applied to the university, was ready to take my entrance exams, and I passed them with flying colors. Was ready to show up. All of a sudden, I found out that I wasn't admitted. Surprise, surprise. So as I learned, there was, according to proportional representation, each ethnic group in Soviet Union, former Soviet Union, was assigned certain proportional percentage in the university. It wasn't written down anywhere, but there were verbal instructions, and anyway, my name, Znamenski, sounded too Jewish, and I was not admitted. So friends of my family tried to provide a consolation. One of them said to my mother, "Oh, don't worry, let your son go to work for 2 years on a factory to beef up his working class background. There is a good quota for workers in the college, so he will be admitted without any entrance exams." Another provided one more consolation. So he will be drafted into the army anyway. He is 18-year-old. There is a preferential treatment in college admissions for soldiers, former young males who were drafted and did their service. So I didn't want to waste my brain power by doing this military service. So we went the route which millions of Russians went at that time, and today they still travel this route. We paid a bribe to an administrator, and that's how I was admitted into a college. So what I am going to do, again, the moral of the story, the moral of the story from the very beginning. So group preferences kill any initiative. So I'm biased, very biased, I have to admit, so I'll try. And the rest of the story, which is here, the first two things, I want to draw attention to two things. First, class, ethnic, affirmative action. AA, it stands for affirmative action in former Soviet Russia. The reason I want to draw attention to this, because in our debates about affirmative action and today these debates about racial affirmative action, they mutated into debates about class affirmative action. We don't bring experiences of the former Soviet Union. Even Thomas Sowell, a political scholar who everybody knows in this audience, I'm sure, whose works I admire and whose scholarship I admire, in his book about affirmative action, he doesn't mention the Soviet experiences. So I will briefly enlighten you and show you a few slides of how it was in Soviet Russia. Second thing, I will go really quickly with you, because I'm sure everybody knows about debates 1990s during the cultural wars here in the United States about the fate of affirmative action, in order to understand what I'm trying to bring up at the end of my talk, the current attempts to mutate racial, ethnic affirmative action into class and social affirmative action. So that's where we are right now. Anyway, let's start with Red Russia, class affirmative actions. There were two types of affirmative action in Russia designed in the 1920s. First, it was class affirmative action. Okay, the former exploiters, bourgeoisie, clergy, and people like this had to be discriminated in favor of workers and peasants. Okay, and there were certain all groups of population were divided into particular classes and social groups. They were literally ascribed their class affiliation. Okay. And here is the pentagram of Soviet classes in the 1920s. And when you see pluses, minuses, it means preferential treatment. So we have preferential treatment for workers who literally could enter colleges, got jobs, administrative jobs without any screening. Okay. In fact, in the colleges, there were special working class departments were created, like university college type departments to beef up intellectual energy workers in order to admit them into colleges. Peasants also good, but not exactly good as workers. Intelligentsia, unreliable people, always ask questions, so zero. So they were not discriminated outright, but at the same time they were not admitted too much because there were some slots. There should be some slots for workers and peasants. Clergy, bourgeoisie, former oppressors were to be kept out. Otherwise, they would infect the job place. They would infect colleges with their subversive ideas. Okay. When so-called exploiters were phased out by the end of 1920s, we have three classes remaining. Again, it's pyramid of ascribed classes. The borders among these groups were very shaky because through bribes, through negotiating with local bureaucrats, you could change your class affiliation. Okay, but essentially we have this pyramid of ascribed classes where workers on the top, peasants in the middle, okay, and intelligentsia right now moves at the bottom, and they became unreliable because there was no bourgeoisie and clergy to fight against right now. Okay, in addition to class affirmative action, there was ethnic affirmative action. So there were two affirmative actions. And there is no research, by the way, on class affirmative action in the Soviet Union. But there is much research recently done on ethnic affirmative action. Okay, there is a marvelous book by Terry Martin, Affirmative Action Empire, which analyzes this. Strange as it may sound, Stalin in the 1920s, he was not a disruptor, killer of the nations. He was promoter of national diversity. He was in charge of National Commissariat for Nationalities Affairs, okay? Because the slogan of the early Bolsheviks was to promote diversity, ethnic cultures, okay? The bottom line of this approach was let them flourish, let them exhaust themselves, and the sooner they do it, the better, the sooner they will merge into this huge entity called the Soviet people. Okay. So we have a Soviet ethno-territorial pentagram, okay, where Russians, I should have put minuses and pluses, but I forgot. Russians will go with minus because they were former exploiters, majority. Okay. Titular nations, republics, it's major ethnic groups like Ukrainians, Uzbeks, the Turks, and so forth. They were native northerners, aboriginal people. Preferences, republics, preferences. National minorities, it's small groups within republics, within Ukraine, within Belarus. Jews were ambivalent because Jews were very educated. So they always like Russians, they also like Russians had to humble themselves in favor of their others. So that was the official program of the early Bolsheviks. The official program of the early Bolsheviks until 1929. So then at one point Stalin realized that ethnic groups didn't want to merge, they spread their wings. They don't want to be consolidated into one huge entity, Soviet people. So that's when he comes in and clips their wings. He phases them out, as national elites. Okay. So essentially, the same story, rewriting history from non-Russian viewpoint, again, sounds familiar, right? 1920s, so Russians and Jews had to humble themselves in order to give preferences to their other groups. Okay. How is it related to the United States? Now let's move to the United States. See, I'm moving fast forward. So here's the stuff we have to deal with in the United States today. Okay. Today we have ethno-racial pentagram. It's officially, I call it pentagram, although David Hollinger, historian, who for the first time drew attention of Americans to this in the early 1990s, he called it ethno-racial Pentagon, ethno-racial pentagon. But I'm using, to dramatize the whole issue, I'm using another expression, to ethno-racial pentagram and the red star. So here we have these 5 groups. 1977, that's when officially this pentagram was introduced. Office of Budget and Management in the United States, that's when information was and still is collected on the basis of this pentagram, or pentagon, if you wish. See the similarities? Okay. Now it's simply just look into this. I need this context in order for us to catch what's going on today. So we have spirit of the time, 1960s, 1970s. We have this affluent society theory, left liberal elite that is infested with these ideas of social engineering, preferences, grave society, war on poverty, white guilt. Ian Nixon, Republicans also, we're all Keynesians now. Okay, planning. Plus, don't forget about the context, the international context that made affirmative action in the United States possible. Again, by reading this, what I'm trying to, the gist of this slide is that what I'm trying to bring to your attention is that it was unavoidable evil, because I saw a few articles written by some respected scholars who essentially argued that it's some kind of a conspiracy. What Economic Opportunity Office decided in 1966 to classify people according to their groups. So the point I'm trying to make, it was unavoidable evil. So we came where we were to be, because unavoidable, and away from Western civilization, multiculturalism, third world, interest in left socialist ideas. So establishment, civil rights groups, they were not looking for solution. They didn't go to free enterprise. They didn't go to, let's say, T.W. Washington. They were looking for solutions by subscribing to ideas of Malcolm X, Du Bois. So that's where they were going. They didn't go to the system of free enterprise. And it was natural. So eventually we have a pocket of socialism in the United States. That's my argument, that I consider this bureaucracy that polices diversity, mentality, media, and cultural outlets, media outlets. It's a pocket of socialism that was installed unavoidably, unfortunately, in 1960s, 1970s by both Democrats and Republicans. And essentially, we're talking here about proportional representation and outcomes. I'm sure many of you, by the end of 1990s, the system of racial preferences was challenged. There were court decisions. It's because we had to deal with these horrible consequences when millions of immigrants took advantage of this system, and it was challenged in the courts. And here's I'm coming to the end. Here is the gist of my talk. The court decisions, if to summarize in court decisions, the message was very simple. So racial affirmative action should be one of many factors. That's what we hear. That's what we heard in this famous Michigan decision on this debate about preferences. The Supreme Court said racial affirmative action should be one of many factors. And since courts challenged this system, so we are moving right now to the socio-economic or class affirmative action, and many colleges are already moving in this direction. The problem is that will it resolve the issue or not? Will it make the playing field fair or not? So here's some attempts to save affirmative action. Some people offered to scale it to the blacks. Others said, no, we should expand it, introduce clusters to hire whole groups of faculties, for instance, teachers in schools, minority schools. Now that's the whole thing where I want to, I'm finishing my talk, but what I want to bring to your attention here, today we are in the middle of debates, and if you click affirmative action, Google it, you will see that there's a lot of debates. And in the middle of these debates is Richard Kallenberg, who is a senior fellow of Century Foundation. So his landmark book, Remedy, Class, Race, and Affirmative Action. So he simply, and a lot of liberals agree with him, that we need to use a different criteria to admit people into colleges, so based on their class origin. Even entry-level jobs on the basis of your class origin. Governmental contracting, which before Small Business Administration did on racial, ethnic basis, now should be done on the basis of your class. Okay. Again, and here's the end. I'm finishing. You don't have to be an economist to understand the stupidity. That's literal, it's nonsense. Okay, look at this. Take labor market. Take labor market and how it will work. Okay, affirmative action based on class, not on racial preferences. So we are having competition for good jobs. Okay, we draw candidates to particular jobs and we draw them away from needed jobs, which economy needed. So we mess up the labor market. We produce shortages. And I believe it's one of the reasons, again, not the only reason, why we have illegal immigration, because we cultivate this group of citizen aristocrats, Americans who don't want to take certain jobs because we draw them, even kids from poor families, we draw them to these privileged jobs. So we exhaust the labor market. We dry it up. Okay. Again, inequality in the name of equality. That's what we have. And here I want to finish by comparing affirmative action with a dragon. It's like a dragon. You kill one hand, like you cut one head, racial preferences. Another head grows. So class affirmative action. So you kill this head, cut this head, something else will grow. Why? Because we have affirmative action mentality in our mainstream. It entered in the fabric of American society, and I don't know, will we find this Excalibur to kind of hit it right in the heart. And I guess the only Excalibur is to treat people based on their merit. Thank you.